All right. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for being here. Um, and I think there's some benefits to having a small group. We can really kind of dive deep and help JD and Trip think in detail about potential implementation for these things. We also are recording so that folks who couldn't make the workshop today will be able to have this as a resource on YouTube in the future. So we'll go ahead and go through, and if there happens to be fewer questions than anticipated, we can always jump in on other breakout rooms toward the end before the closing session. But again, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. So my name is Corrine Kannenberg. I actually think I might have forgotten to introduce myself in the main session, but I'm the communications director at the Alliance, and trying to juggle all the millions of tech things on the back end here. But really happy to be here and help facilitate this employers breakout group. And I'm going to ask the kind of expert panelists here to introduce themselves. And maybe we could start with Haley. Could you all just say a little bit about where you're coming from, and if you could introduce your involvement with remote employment or work-based learning, what brings you here to talk about this topic?
Yeah, so my name's Haley Shoaf. I'm one of the co-executive directors of Unlocked Labs, and we're an organization that does a number of things, but predominantly hires current formerly incarcerated folks building technology tools to support prison education. And we were one of the early adopters, I guess, of hiring currently incarcerated folks in Maine. So we have had a number of people over the last 3 or so years on our payroll. You have really seen it all, I would say, in terms of that process, and learned and grown as an organization because of it.
Wonderful, great. Lauren, would you mind going next?
Thank you. I'm Lauren Hansen. I'm the director of the Adams State University Prison Education Program. And we started hiring people right as I got started there. It's why I actually went over to Adams State because I could hire. The DOC said that we were allowed to hire people who were incarcerated to teach for our program. Um, it's been a journey. I'll say there's been a lot that we've learned along the way. And now, even today, like there's even more changes that have happened here in the state. So it's more difficult to hire someone who's incarcerated than previous. And it was pretty difficult before. But this work is like super important for not just Adams State, but breaking down like doors for folks. To be able to teach in programs across the country, and hopefully um, we have like a report that one day we'll hopefully be able to publish soon, um, maybe by the end of the year, that talks about like some of the challenges we have, and then also a the implementation of like a uh, I'm sorry, like my brain's moving a million miles a minute, like a training program for people who are currently incarcerated. Our program is traditionally a correspondence program, so folks can get their master's degree through correspondence, but then do they know how to teach if they haven't even taken a class in person and they're teaching in person? So it's really just like a training program to teach those folks like how to uh, facilitate a classroom in a proper way. So I don't remember all of the other questions Kareen asked us to say, but that's basically what I do. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Natalie Aragonez. I'm the operations and program administrator here at the Alliance, and I have the greatest honor and privilege of working most directly with our current fellows and our previous fellows. I see Victoria right here. She just came in, and I just want to say, like, what a absolutely beautiful opportunity. This has just been a wonderful experience. Thank you for all of the words that you said in the opening, Victoria. So I had the opportunity to work with our previous cohort of fellows, and I work with our current cohort, which is Lali. You met him in the opening, and we also have wonderful, wonderful woman. Her name is Amy. And so, yeah, I work most directly with them. I really co-work, we co-build, co-facilitate. And it's really one of the heart center opportunities that I have working with the alliances, working with our fellows. And so, yeah, that's what I do. And I'm excited. This is such a small group, and I think this is going to be a lot of fun. And like Corrine said, I feel like this will be a great opportunity to have dialogue from individuals that are participating and from the panel. I think this is going to be a nice, warm discussion. So I look forward to it. Thanks, Corrine.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm so happy to get started here. Thank you for those introductions. I'm just going to pull up the Miro board here, and what we're going to do is really kind of both dive into some of the things that Tori and Lali and Leo highlighted for employers in the implementation guide itself. And then I'm also going to ask for our panelists to anything in these categories that they have found to be true in the implementation of remote employment and work-based learning. So I'm going to just pull up the Miro board here. Sorry, thank you all for bearing with me. I truly have like the weirdest setup today with multiple screens. Um,
You're doing a great job, Corrine.
Thank you. Okay, so can everyone see the Miro board here? All right. So we wanted to start off by thinking about the benefits as outlined in the EiA guide for each of these kind of stakeholder groups. So for employers, some of the things that were highlighted by the authors of the guide were accessing a diverse talent pool, um, and also being able to address workplace shortages and retention issues. There's also a highlight of other kinds of incentives for hiring currently incarcerated and formerly incarcerated employees, such as some financial federal incentives like the Work Opportunity Tax Credit, which is talked about in the guide. Um, but I'm curious what all came to mind for the panelists in terms of reasons employers should look to people who are currently incarcerated um, as a pool of potential employees, or maybe even another way of thinking about it too is, when speaking to colleagues, how do you talk about this work? Why they might be interested, or even making the argument to convince folks who aren't currently doing this work to begin implementation.
I can jump in. Um, so I think the reason why this is like really important, I so I'm formerly incarcerated, and while I was incarcerated, we used to sit there and think about like how cool it would be to have one of us in front of us. So like for professor wise, like this is like something I dreamed about while I was incarcerated, and we never thought it would be possible, right? So now that it is possible, like how do we make that a bigger a bigger thing across the country? And like having like knowing that we have a few professors who are currently incarcerated and like hundreds of people who want to do that, it's because it gives them like hope inside. Like David Carrillo, who worked for us, like got out. Like he was able to get clemency because of working for us. So it's like a one form of like abolition as well. And so this kind of work like frees people. And then when he got home, similar to Tori, he got home and he had money to be able to like do the things that he needed to do, um, and able to get a car and an apartment and like not rely on his family anymore, and pay his family back for paying for his education for when he was inside. Um, and so I think that the like implementing those, like I didn't know that that was the outcomes that would come, but I knew that we needed to be in front of everyone. Um, and I knew that if we aren't in front of people, like all of us are none, right? Like we know that that's a thing. If we aren't there, then we're doing a disservice. And then for the students who are in those classes, like I can't tell you how many students are like, well, hey, like I'm never getting out. And this is finally like an opportunity where, well, like David was never getting out, so maybe I will one day. But I'm going to start my education, start my associate's degree, and work all the way up to a master's, and I'll find a way to pay for the master's, and then I'll be able to do this too. Like it keeps people like doing the right things inside. Oh, well, I don't know, right things, but like doing like the things that give them a better life while they're incarcerated. So I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at.
I'll jump in for a second, Karina, if I can. Thank you, Lauren. That was great. I think one of the things that come to mind is that the impact of these opportunities are really boundless, and they're limitless as to how far they might reach. And for me, it always comes back to a place of that lack of self-worth and that lack of self-identity, not necessarily for everybody, but I know for a lot of us, and I'm an individual that's formerly incarcerated as well, and in that time I had zero social capital. I had lost ties with all family. I was no longer a part of my children's life, and so one of the things that is really the most profound, is not only the opportunity to earn that money and increase, your monetary, where you are economically, clearly, but it's creating that social capital and that family cohesion, or perhaps even reunification. Um, and it gives you really just it allows you to build that confidence and that restorative practice that is involved in any type of community and connection. And so I really think that that's something that is very, very important. It's not even necessarily, it's so much deeper than a work opportunity, although that is incredibly important. I feel like it's so much more than that. So
Great. Thank you.
I can jump in as well. I think so, echoing maybe a little bit of what Lauren was saying, like I think that we found remote employment for folks inside to be a game changer just in terms of, both like efficacy and opportunity and normalization while people are inside, and like being able to, have purpose and move forward and build skills, but then also just like what it allows you to do when you go home. So we have a guy that worked for us for 2 years-ish in Maine, and in that time he was able to save over $50,000. And to make a long, involved story short, he actually was originally from New Jersey, and in like the months before he came home, he was transferred back there, in a thing that was profoundly destabilizing, because he had been in Maine for 14 years. But he basically then was released out the door into a community where he had no social ties and no community and that sort of thing. But just like the nature of the conversation when you have 50K in a bank account is just like a dramatically different conversation than when you have, $500 or $0. And like, he got out May 23rd actually, and like has a place and, has a car, and we've been able to since connect him to like, NJ Step and some other community in New Jersey. And so that's been helpful, but like have hired him back. And the like I don't know, just like that being able to like take care of the basics without having to worry about where your next meal is coming from is like seems like it should be a no-brainer, but also is game changing because I've also been on the other side of like helping people walk out the door with very, very little to turn to. And so that in and of itself, I think has continued to make me super passionate that like this should be the norm rather than the exception for folks because it doesn't solve every problem, but it solves a lot of them.
And Haley, I just want to say, like, someone coming out, I'm part of NJ Step, or like that's where I got my education is in Jersey. There's not a lot of opportunity if you're not in education out in New Jersey, like when you get out. So it's very different than like Maine, it seems like, from what I can tell. So it's kind of sad that like that can happen to somebody too, but at least he had that financial standing. Because if you don't, like if I didn't, there's parts of New Jersey if you went back to, there's no public transportation, which people don't think of. But like there's no access to public transportation where I went back in New Jersey. And I didn't have a driver's license. So like some if somebody had $50,000, that's a lot different than me who came home with absolutely nothing in that state and no like really no support other than when I went to college at Rutgers. So I'm glad that he's connected with NJSEP. I was gonna be like, I'll connect him. So
Well, yeah, no, we got him kind of Joey at JFF and
oh,
Chris and
Joey's great.
great folks, but no, so totally, it's very yeah, it's interesting state to state how different the ecosystems are, and I think he went back to somewhere near Trenton where it's like, yeah, there's not a lot going on there.
Mm-mm.
Yeah,
You
this
know,
is
I think,
all. Oh,
go ahead, Karine, go ahead.
no, please finish.
I think it's interesting to look at the differences in and where an individual is as far as how far they've are in serving their sentence. So, for example, an individual that has an opportunity for, work-based learning that is close to reentry or about to reenter or reintegrate into society, as opposed to an individual like David, like you were talking about, or like other people that you were speaking toward, Lauren, that have an extensive amount of time left on their sentences. And so that's what I'm saying is like, so either you're going to reintegrate with some money in the bank and not have to go to a case manager and beg them for transportation bus tickets or, work on, I mean, I've been a case manager before and I've been an individual in reentry with absolutely nothing. And it's a completely different world when you have something in the bank account, you have work experience and the resume, and you have professional ties, and you've begun the networking, and you're able to integrate in a very and not that it's not difficult, and not that there aren't barriers, and there's still things that need to be worked out. It's not seamless, but you have an opportunity to be able to reintegrate in a much more successful manner than an individual that doesn't have any of that. And speaking for the people that aren't ready to be released or might not be releasing at all, they're able to contribute back home in a manner that they never would before. So, like, I mean, you talked about it just a second ago, Haley, being able to provide and ensure that you have the basics and the necessities to take care of yourself. But what about being able to send money back home and taking care of those kids or taking care of bills or helping other people within your family? I mean, and that's why I'm saying the bounds of this are really limitless. So, of course, it's fostering efficacy and an agency and an identity within the individual, but it's also that ripple impact is the family and the community as well, even if you're incarcerated and not anywhere near release.
Yeah, and the other thing that I can say is it's like they know their worth. Like we've all like whoever in this call has been incarcerated or even not, right? Like there's times where you take a job that like is I don't know, like where you're not getting paid enough, or there's times where you don't feel like you have any worth within yourself, but you start to know yourself and like know what you're worth and then know how to, I think these programs, or at least how we do, is like ask for more money. Like ask for if you're doing a panel while you're still incarcerated, ask for somebody to pay for your expertise. Like we've had people do that. Um, we're always asked to have like our professors. speak out on different panels, and I'm like, well, how much are you going to pay our professors? Because that's their expertise is worth something, right? And so I think I learned that more at the Alliance than I did anywhere else. I used to work at the Alliance, and we used to pay people, you know, like a little bit of money just to like even be on a panel. Um, and I think that's something that like grew from there, how I feel about that. But I think inside, I'm seeing my students like understand if they're going to be on a TV show or they're going to be on whatever else, they ask for like, what compensation am I going to get for this and advocate for themselves in that way. It's not all about money, but it's also about like self-esteem, right?
Absolutely. And these are, I think, really important topics to touch on. And I think also for those of us in this room and in this context, like providing opportunities for those who are incarcerated to have a sense of dignity and worth is the utmost important thing. But I just want to recognize, sort of for the sake of doing this activity, that for some employers, they might come to this from different perspectives, maybe never having worked with formerly incarcerated people, and perhaps certainly not currently incarcerated people. And so I'm just curious if there's anything else that we could add to this board in terms of thinking of how to make the argument for those less familiar with, um, social justice movements more broadly to employ incarcerated adjuncts, to hire incarcerated fellows, to hire full-time employees who are incarcerated. How do we help them to make that leap when they might not be familiar with some of the other sort of stuff that we're talking about?
I mean, I think when you think about it in terms of pure practicality terms, like it just makes sense. I mean, we've hired a lot of people that are currently incarcerated, but also quite a few people that are formerly incarcerated as well. Like people are just incredibly hardworking, motivated, loyal employees. So if you're just like an employer that is interested in this for the context of your business, like it's hard to find, especially in a market where like it can be hard to find and keep good employees. Like we've had incredible success with the current formerly incarcerated employees we've hired. I think from a like government and economic perspective, it like just makes a lot of sense from like a state policy perspective. And I think other folks have touched on this already, but that for the amount that we invest in incarcerating people and like the costs of recidivism and that sort of thing, like being able to have people earn income that they could use to offset some of those costs and to ensure that they have the tools that they need to not come back. Like those if you're like running a correctional system or a state legislator or those sorts of things, like the economics of it are a no-brainer. So those are the two that immediately come to mind for me.
There are some motivational implications here for employers as well. Haley kind of touched on it, but I'd like to dive a little deeper. And sometimes it can be terribly hard to motivate employees within an organization because on Friday, they're thinking about what they're going to do on the weekend. On Monday, they're still coming off the weekend and not fully present. But when you're incarcerated, your job is your work, your play. It's your safe space when the facility's acting up and things are difficult. It's a place to focus your mind, and it's what gives you purpose. It's what has you waking up excited in the morning and going to bed early so that you can wake up excited in the morning to do your work the following day. It kind of becomes your raison d'être when you're inside. It's your reason for being, and it's something that you cling to because it's what matters most. So as much as it can be a life raft for incarcerated people, it makes them highly motivated and highly dependable because you don't have to constantly be trying to figure out how to spark that inspiration or to reinvigorate people who are out in the world with a lot of options.
I'm gonna kind of say something a little bit different than that, but I agree with all of what you guys are saying. The other thing that for employers I think needs to be like implemented and hasn't, and I've talked about it with a few other people who are directors and hire people who are formerly incarcerated and currently incarcerated, and I used to talk about it with Mary at the Alliance, is that we don't do enough training for people who are coming out of incarceration and support their growth, right? Like I had some hard times working um after incarceration and like figuring life out, right? Like how do we ensure that they are successful? Like we had somebody who worked with me at one time. He was formerly incarcerated and he didn't know how to turn on an Apple MacBook. He didn't know how to use the MacBook the way that a PC worked. And the only computers we used at that time were MacBooks. And he wasn't ever taught how to use a MacBook. And I'm like, he was using his personal computer and it just like wasn't like great for him. And then there was so many other things that like to not have the like confidence to be like, hey, I'm struggling here. Could you help? So how do we as employers or people who are thinking about employing folks, like how do we open up a space to be like, hey, like here's some training for you on basic stuff. Like I didn't know how to use a Google Doc when I got out. Like that, I was like, I don't know, touch screens didn't exist when I went in. So when I got out, I'm like, what? Like, oh, we can both write at the same time. It was like magic. And so like just like a basic like 1 month training for your people that are coming out or who are incarcerated on like how to use a Google Doc, how to use the computer, how to do like all of these like little basic things that folks wouldn't even know, like how to write an email, how to send a calendar invite with a Zoom link on it. Like those like little things that like people aren't thinking about when they're hiring folks because they want to like hire us, right? Like we want people to be hired and we want to do it, but then we forget that maybe people aren't where they need to be in that position and we're setting them up for failure if we don't do that. So I think that's like the biggest note for like employers that I would say is like don't set your folks up for failure. Let's do some training. JD, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you everybody so much for this panel. My name's JD. I'm the Director of Career Development at Cal Poly Humboldt, and I hope it's okay that I throw in some thoughts here. But as I've worked in as a career advisor for several years, I'm starting to see parallels in the students at our Arcata campus and our incarcerated students at our Pelican Bay campus. And the one of the parallels that remains consistent is like students not really knowing what skills they're building and actualizing those skills. And I think it's the students at our Pelican Bay campus are almost uh, inherently at a deficit where like in a system or in an institution that's designed to break you down, they're coming into we just started doing one-on-ones with our students at Pelican Bay, and where the question is, what kind of skills do you bring to the table? What are you excited to be doing? They're not thinking about the work that they're doing in there, the groups that they're facilitating when they're in there and everything there. So, like as I think about this question, and I think about like, in a remote opportunity, I think that it speaks to that skill development and perhaps I don't know if this is going to be a question later for employers, but like, what are you doing to help these students speak to their skills that they're gaining in this role and not expecting them to just know that immediately? It does take a bit of career coaching and guidance.
Yeah, that's great. I think we're all sort of starting to get on some of the more nitty-gritty details of implementation here. So, unless anyone has anything else that they really want to add to this particular board, I might have us move on to some of the main kind of considerations and challenges around implementation. And then our last slide will be kind of the recommended tips and tricks from the implementation guide. But I think this is incredibly helpful. And of course, there's going to be overlap in a lot of these kind of categories that we've created here. But even just offering folks a kind of script or a bullet point list of the reasons why I think can be so helpful because for some, that's really just what they need to get the ball rolling to take that next step of actually having the conversations to implement.
Corinne, can I add something just really quick? And we'd probably touch on it in like a little bit later, but just in case. I just
Absolutely.
wanted to say also there is such a difference in spectrum with DOCs, like even in the same state, right? So one state might have full internet access, major, access to technology and all of these things. And so these individuals have been using technology for years and are up to speed and not only, literate, but really accelerated. And then there's other DOCs that have absolutely no access to technology. And so I think it's really important to kind of think about as from an employer perspective, like what is the candidate that you're looking for? Does it necessarily have to be somebody that has brushed up skills and has met all of these, specific requirements? Or is it an individual that you really want to take the time to train and that you want to be able to develop these the digital literacy and access to technology and take the time to say, this is how you do Zoom and this is how you would do that? Because there is very much a difference in spectrum, and that's not to say one candidate is better than the other, because I promise you they're going to be like absolutely loyal, dedicated rock stars. They just need to be given the chance. So individuals, I just wanted to say that because there is a difference, and the way that you develop those skills are going to be very different from facility to facility as pertaining to what access they have currently.
Totally. Sorry, go ahead, Haley.
I was just gonna say, I think one foundational part of this conversation is infrastructure at the DOC level when it comes to technology and things like that. And I think that different states have done it different ways, but we're sort of in the business of thinking about infrastructure. And so often tell folks that like there's a foundational level of infrastructure that is just like table stakes in order to make this stuff work.
Mm-hmm.
And that if this is something that like a DOC wants to allow and invest in, et cetera, or a program is pushing to allow it to happen and wants to work with a DOC, like basic things like internet network access, device access, who owns the device, who like software access, communication tool access. Like you have to sort of think through and check at least a baseline level. Like that's probably
Yep.
the baseline number of things you have to check off to begin with. And there has to be kind of some forethought around infrastructure and around policy around that infrastructure in order to make any of this feasible. So like one of the reasons that Maine has been such a foreleader in this work is because they have that infrastructure, right? Like they have that they did a lot of it for education, and then that allowed them to open it up to things like remote work. And I think other states are seeing that, but that's like so I think generally, and there's different ways that you could do this, but like generally, I think it works best across a larger population if that's infrastructure that the Department of Corrections itself invests in and supports. And doing that sort of on the front end is helpful and needed. I think that there's other things too that you have to think about on the front end that maybe programs don't always think about, which is things like payment and like financials. And, we've run into challenges. Currently, we pay people as 1099 employees and have run into challenges when we wanted to try to make them W-2 employees. And like there currently are not people that will pay workers' comp insurance for employees that are currently incarcerated. And so just like institutional, this is both on the part of the employer and on the part of the DOC of like, how is compensation going to happen? How is that then dispersed to the person? Is the DOC taking any off the top? Like, what sort of financial literacy and support does the person have on the back end to do things like their taxes? I also sort of count that in the bucket of infrastructure that needs to be thought through on the front end to like figure some of these things out.
Haley, and social security cards when you want them to be a W-2 employee,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Like that's how we pay folks here in Colorado. And now the Social Security Administration, we love them here, refuses to give anybody who has more than a year left a Social Security card. So like our lifers, that's why like I can't hire anybody at the moment because we're fighting them. And the DOC is like, hey, we have this like program happening and we want it to happen. And now we're probably gonna have to think of a different way to like compensate any new folks. Cause like the current folks that are teaching, cool. One of them gets like direct deposit in her bank account on the outside, which is fantastic. So we don't have to pay the DOC, but whoever gets their paycheck like within the DOC, like sent in, gets whatever off the top. Like the DOC gets some money. Um, but I was surprised that they allow us to um do like a direct deposit for somebody. I was like, yes, like let's do that. And she had a bank account on the outside, so that made it really easy. And family support. But for those who don't, like that's harder, and then they lose some of their wages, right? And then there's also like some random laws on books, depending on what DOC you're in, that there's the more you make, the more they take, right? So you have to be mindful of those, and that's not the case here, thankfully. But we do know that across the country there are different laws about compensation. But I think the biggest challenge would be a social security card. And most folks like who've done 30 years, they may have them in like this bank inside like say that they're on record, but then when they go to look for it so that we can actually see it, like I have to go in and like look at it, then they don't exist anymore. Oh, they're missing. Like what happened to this person's social security card in the DOC? But they've been there for 30 years, so who knows where any of their records went, their birth certificate. And so then they have to start from scratch to be able to even get their social security card. And so that's like inherently the biggest nightmare we've had
Mm.
in implementing hiring folks. But a 1099 employee would be great. We just don't do that really at our university.
Totally. We've gone through the same process of getting people ID as well. And like things like when you start a new job, like the first thing you do is bring in two forms of identification to, do whatever certification. If you don't have two forms of identification, like how do you do that? One sort of esoteric law we figured out is that in some states, the warden's ID can be a proxy for the person that's incarcerated, which that's a whole other wild like segue that I won't get into the implications of, but like you're like, oh, okay, actually, like if you can get a copy of the warden's driver's license, that serves as proxy for the person that's incarcerated. So we did that in Maine actually. But
Wow.
just things like that, that's wild that you like, and it varies so much state to state.
Yeah, it's so strange. I don't understand.
Yeah, so those are all great. Thank you so much for talking about these because I think in the guide there are three kind of main challenges or considerations that had to be taken into account when beginning to implement employment, in particular, when there is some kind of wage or payment involved. So technology is a huge one. For it to be a remote position, there usually has to be some kind of technological access. Though I think Natalie made a really good point that thinking about based on any particular person's skill level, but also based on the needs of any particular role, that technological access could be variable based on the position and the person, and allowing that kind of flexibility can be really helpful. But certainly compensation is one of those big areas that can be really kind of mind-bending, I think, for people when they're thinking of implementing remote employment for people who are incarcerated, and often can be one of those things that um, is met with an immediate no, sort of, the taking an opportunity or an idea um, to systems, whether they be complex institutions that would be employing someone who's incarcerated or um, the carceral system And talking about fair wage employment for some can be a non-starter, but I think thinking creatively about these processes can be helpful in the ways that you all outlined. Um, One of the final areas that was discussed in the guide as a main point of consideration or challenge is around eligibility. So, for example, some of the things that were discussed in the guide were, um, the folks who are eligible for paid internships, fellowships, or even potentially employment need to be currently enrolled in a college program. Sometimes there's case plan compliance, which can be really specific to a state or a prison system. Um, History of good behavior conduct in the facility, which again can be very much open to interpretation and can vary based on um, the prison itself, and also some consideration of prior work experience. I think this was kind of the point that Natalie highlighted earlier, and is part of a hiring process for most anyone. Thinking about what is required in terms of previous experience to do the job at hand, and where there's the ability to be flexible or to not be flexible in that consideration of previous experience. Um, what are your all thoughts about eligibility and recruitment? How to think about um, navigating this complex system of eligibility to when some of the requirements might not even be um, strictures that you as an employer have set up, but that the prison itself is setting up for someone to become eligible.
We have a huge eligibility problem, and it like at Adams State. So Adams State hires people who have sex offenses to teach in our correspondence program. So they're not teaching virtually or going inside prisons, or they're not teaching on campus, but they teach correspondence. So they correspond with folks who are incarcerated to get their degrees up to a master's, right? And so we don't have an issue hiring people who have a sex offense on their record in that way. Um, However, when we brought this like hiring what we call the turning graduates into instructors program over to the DOC, there's a federal PREA law that prohibits or makes it harder to hire people who have sex offenses. Um, because say if I hired somebody on the outside who has a sex offense to go inside, they have to have a supervised person or a person that's supervising them at all times while they're incarcerated. And so they're using that rule to say that people who have sex offenses can't be paid instructors with us. However, I hope I don't get in trouble for saying this, but I'm going to. But the DOC also allows those folks who have sex offenses to facilitate groups like Seven Habits and what other groups within the prison system and become peer support folks, but they won't let them become professors. Um, and it's a huge issue right now in our facilities. One of them has like 80 or upwards of 80% people who have sex offenses. And most of those folks could like be instructors for us. And or a lot of them could be, and we can't have them, right? I think the other thing that we find is there are some folks that are there for some hate crimes. And we don't know what people's crimes are because I don't ask other than, do you have a sex offense? And then we had somebody there that was incarcerated for a hate crime that we did not know about. Um, and the students didn't want to be in the class with that person. So if we were to hire him, then our students wouldn't take any class that that person was going to take. So we had that conversation recently, well, maybe like a few months ago with some of the students who came to us and like let us know. And so then now we are like, do we hire someone who had a hate crime 20 years ago and maybe still practices that kind of thing or not? And we're not supposed to know about those things because we were anonymously told by students. And so um, it's because we don't ask what people have done as their crime. Sometimes you fall into those things and like the bias of the students, and then making sure that we don't have bias in our program, and then how do we implement that? Um, Personally, like I don't think people who have hate crimes would be the best ideal folks to be teaching a group of BIPOC folks in our class. So we have, but we can't hire anybody right now because he doesn't have a social security card. So it kind of works out. But I think that's like the biggest things is like who the people are inside and like how they're viewed by students would be a challenge. And then like what do we do about sex offense crimes? Like that like doesn't mean that someone is inherently a horrific person and can't teach a class. And I think they'll probably be some of the best like they have like the humanities degrees and the masters and the PhDs that we need, some of them, and they would really help us with the program. The other thing that I would say that comes to mind with like eligibility is some people who are completely eligible have none of these issues at all and do not get along with DOC staff well, right? So like the DOC in some places handpick who is eligible for our program without us even meeting the people. And then that like kind of takes away our ability to hire folks who could really be eligible and could be amazing just because they don't get along with an officer or an education department person or the warden or whoever at the facility if they don't have like a good relationship with them. So then it's like who are the folks that are being sent to us and how could we recruit around that is kind of like, one of the things that I think about when we're um trying to hire folks. And then the other issue is as well, like we could have like a list of 40 people who want the positions, and then we give it to the DOC and like we had a list of like 10 folks that we were gonna about to hire before the social security thing came up. And they give us one person back that we could hire. And so we aren't really sure why the 9 other people weren't selected across multiple facilities, but they only let us move forward with one, and then we couldn't even move forward with that person because of the social security situation. So I think um, the DOC making like the final decisions, I understand it, but I also hate it because I think people should all have the opportunity if they're like eligible to do so.
Chime in.
Mhm.
Um, so I think it's really interesting because, with the Alliance, we're a national organization, so we have the ability to work uh, across the country with different DOCs, but not all DOCs are ready to pilot these types of programs, work-based learning or education in action, any type of remote employment opportunities, not clearly, not everybody's ready for. But recently, we put a job posting up for an intern, and we were kind of like just seeing what was happening across the landscape and if individual or if DOCs were interested and met these types of requirements, then and if they had a proxy within a program, they could apply for the position. And there were certain requirements that they had to meet. A lot of them were based around technology, access to technology, that infrastructure. And so I think it's really important when a potential employer, even if they're, working within a specific state, if they're very mindful about preferred and required types of eligibility. So then you have the employer eligibility and then you have DOC eligibility. So those are two different things, and relationships with DOC is very, very important. And it's interesting because hiring practices can differ with different types of opportunities within a different facility. So, for example, like with the first cohort, Victoria, I think she's still in the group, but so there was a relationship that was set with Maine, and we recently piloted in Kansas as well. That's with our second cohort. So we had an individual that was working with us from Kansas, and the DOC actually presented the candidate for us. We didn't necessarily go through the hiring practice of individuals applying for the position because the DOC at the time felt more comfortable with providing us with a candidate. And once we have developed and a successful pilot was launched, then perhaps hiring practices might change and onboarding might be different. And candidates might be required to, for example, interview and things like that. But I think it's really, really important to keep in mind for a potential organization or nonprofit or private employer that is interested in launching or piloting work-based learning, to keep in mind that these practices really require a lot of communication and relationship building with the DOC that you're planning on working within, because they might have their own particular wants for the pilot or the beta. And then once that relationship's established, perhaps that can change a bit. But like I was saying in the beginning, we just did that landscape scan, and there's so many states that are in a position to launch remote work for incarcerated professionals. We recently did an EIA highlight of 6 states. So, I mean, just so that we can understand, on a national level, we have states that are coming green and ready to be online, like Indiana, California, Maine, of course. We have Tennessee, Massachusetts, Washington, Mississippi. There's a lot of states that are ready to do the work, and the DOC has given the green light and the access to technology if that's what the employer requires. There's also opportunity for correspondence work. So not all positions necessarily require access to technology if that employer is willing to launch something that they might be able to do through correspondence. It requires a lot of creativity, a lot of innovation, and a lot of ability to say we want to take down barriers, not help maintain them. So it really requires a lot of time and consideration. But I'm telling you, like, there's dividends on both ends from the individual that's incarcerated. Not only that, but like the culture change within that DOC that happens when their peers see that this is possible, and that incentivizes education, and that incentivizes that good behavior. And I mean, it's like it's limitless, the impact that happens in that culture shift within the facility, to know that these are opportunities that are available. I'll stop talking now.
Good. Thank you, Natalie. Those are I really appreciate how detailed we got in this discussion about some of these considerations and challenges, because I think they're really front of mind for folks in this implementation process. Um, for the sake of time, I'm going to kind of uh, lead us into questions and just have on the screen for a couple of minutes the tips and tricks that were highlighted in the guide itself around implementation for employers. So really making sure that you assess needs and capacity, adopt second chance hiring practices sort of writ large as an employer, consider a point of contact for this kind of work, embed flexibility into all aspects of this initiative, as we've discussed, and making sure to partner with corrections agencies, even potentially creating an MOA or MOU. But I do want to make sure that for the folks in the room that there's a chance to speak to folks here and ask any specific questions. So yeah, Danielle, I see that you had a question.
Yeah, I was told
Please.
to skip groups because I had an employee question. So, specifically looking at if anybody knows any national level employers who are willing to do remote based work for the incarcerated population, because we are having trouble finding local organizations in the state that don't want to do it. So I don't know if there's any larger scale organizations, companies, that sort of thing that anybody knows of that, have been doing this type of work.
Yeah, I mean, I'm willing to jump in. So Unlocked Labs is doing this in a couple of states and would be happy to just talk about it, and sort of what folks you're looking at getting hired. I found that short term, like the large or national like intermediary organizations that already do justice system type work. So like Vera Institute, JFF, RTI, Unlocked Labs, the Alliance for Higher Education in Prison, all I think have been some like first movers in hiring. And are like good places to look at. And I think as more states come online, are interested in hiring different places. And then I think like to some of the things Lauren talked about, big universities that already do prison education work, either in your state or proximate, I find are also tend to be first movers in the hiring space. Um, there's also RBIJ, which is the Responsible Business Initiative for Justice, I think. Don't quote me on that. I'll find a link to it. They are doing a lot of employer facing work with like big corporations. And I don't know that they've gone like headfirst into this space, but that might be a place to look at like, big national employers that have signed on wanting to do check second chance hiring. Um,
Okay, great. Thanks.
Haley, I was gonna give like all of the same.
Um, Now are these I know like the Alliance had their thing. Are these like okay, just jobs that are on a job board or like they're literally putting out and saying, "Hey, we are only looking for um incarcerated individuals to do this work."
I think some of
If
the
how
interns
to
are
know that which organizations are doing it.
I think some of the internships are looking only for incarcerated folks, but I think when you're looking for jobs, like I know we can't say we're looking specifically for incarcerated
Mhm.
folks when putting out job postings, right? Like you have to be like kind of vague about it. I don't put out job postings for any incarcerated position I'm hiring. I go to the facilities and talk to the people directly. Um, and so like Colorado is where I'm only allowed to hire currently. Um, but formerly incarcerated folks, like I have people that live all over the country, even people in like Mexico, who are teaching for our program. So we kind of like the way that I think about hiring, and this is maybe like an insight as well, is I would hire somebody who's formerly incarcerated before I would hire somebody else, even though maybe that's like not, that's like who I'm looking for. I want to look for people like us. And then it's getting your like HR department on board to like when they're doing that background check and all that fun stuff, like so that they understand what like, okay, well, we're hiring this person and yes, they're gonna have a background and here's what it looks like. Um, and so I think we can't say that we're only looking for people who are formerly incarcerated, but that's who I definitely give preference to. So,
Yeah, I'm looking specifically just currently incarcerated.
what
Um,
state are you in?
Maryland.
Maryland.
I'm corrections, so like we do hire formerly incarcerated. It's a very lengthy and
It
crazy
is.
process, but um, mostly we already do internships for our currently incarcerated but students and stuff who go are in their last year of their higher ed program or have graduated it and that sort of thing with through some of our colleges. But I'm looking specifically for remote work that it could be like a work release opportunity where they're getting paid a living wage and yeah, that
So
sort
I
of.
think that like my suggestion would be to like email the Alliance about that a little bit more and then Vera and JFF, but like specifically JFF and Unlocked Labs too, right? Like
Okay, I'll
reach
email
out to
with
them
them.
directly and be like, hey, I want these programs here. How
Mhm.
can you guys implement them? Or do you know other employers? JFF would be one of the best resources. They're doing that they're like doing stuff like that. They're coming to Colorado or they came to Colorado. They're on the way here, but they're going to different states to look for employers who hire people that are inside or outside, right? Like, so they're doing that kind of work that you're looking for. And Rebecca, if you
Yeah,
don't have,
Villarreal.
oh,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I would say reach out to Rebecca. She'd be the best resource for that.
I also need companies that are going to obviously pay.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's pretty
Got to be
amazing.
at least minimum wage.
And you
So
work at the DOC, like I wish I
yes.
could give you a hug. Like
Yeah,
that's awesome. Thank you for
I'm
that.
the director of education.
Oh, awesome.
One other thing
Also,
I would say
Lee
too.
Burrows. Oh, sorry. Lee Burrows over in DOC
Yeah,
at
Colorado.
yeah,
Mhm.
if you chat with her, she has some really good insight on how that stuff works too.
Awesome.
Mhm.
One other thing I would say is like in thinking about doing this for the first time, potentially looking at opportunities that are specifically for incarcerated folks and or like finding an employer where you could really try it out and work out the kinks.
Mhm.
Because like I know that even something that Maine's dealing with, like they're doing this at a pretty large scale, but
Mhm.
as they've had to like put policy in place.
Yeah. Yeah, we've already got all the stuff in place. I've got the technology. I just got to find the employers now.
Okay.
The Chamber of Commerce in your area, have you ever gone to one of those?
Yeah, I am on the
Um,
board or on a couple organizations where they sit on. They have not been as helpful. Um, just because we're just having such a hard time finding, like I can find employers that will hire them post release. We have great, support post release employment and all. It's just that currently because of all the restrictions that they want to put on it with sex offenders and this and that and all this other stuff. And it's like, and even felony level, it just a lot of them want to put on a lot of different restrictions and it makes it hard. So
well, they're not the right ones, and you'll find the
I
right
know,
ones. I
right?
have faith.
I just want to pop in quickly. Our breakout rooms are gonna close in the next 5 minutes-ish. I just want to make sure, JD, I know that you've been with us in the room as well. Oh, I see you. Um, Great. I want to just
Yeah,
make sure that
thank
you
you.
didn't have any specific questions for our panelists as well. I we got so caught up in the conversation that we didn't do a good job leaving enough time for questions. So I just wanted to make sure before the breakout rooms close. Oh, Danielle, shouldn't have to leave.
Also, Trip has a question too, if we might be able to address that if we have time.
Yeah, Trip's not in the room any longer,
Oh,
but
Trip's gone. Okay,
it
gotcha.
is a good question. We could cover it quickly before the rooms close. Um,
Yeah, if you could
yeah.
cover those pieces, I'd love to just take some quick notes on Tripp's
Sure.
question.
I'll do a rapid fire response. So, okay, let's see here. Who provides technology, basically, right? So, for example, with the folks in Maine, they have access to their own laptops. They're able to keep it with them and keep it in, in the housing unit and things like this. In Kansas, they didn't have, they had accessibility to a laptop. However, it was a shared laptop. And so this individual was in a reentry housing unit. And so she was able to have access to that. It was supervised access. So she couldn't take the computer with her. So there were authorized work hours that she had access to technology. And thankfully, she had full access to internet. She was able to utilize email, which is like a game changer. Initially, we thought we were going to be using Blackboard, LMS Blackboard, and we were happy with that. We were beyond happy. We were going to get creative and make it work. And so that quickly changed when we realized she had full access. But it's really different per DOC. I haven't necessarily seen a DOC where an employer can provide technology to an individual, like purchase a laptop and then take it with them, just because of security protocols and firewalls and things like this that are absolutely necessary and will always be an issue. Security protocols will always be number one priority with DOC. And who provides the technology training when someone's hired? Again, kind of speaking toward that level of digital literacy, but I think it's really important for individuals or potential employers to understand what type of candidate they're looking for, and investing time, professional development, leadership development for these individuals is absolutely crucial. And they're just as deserving as an individual that has had access to technology for years and has that digital literacy, because like we understand 95% will be getting released. And to have that digital literacy, even in the form of understanding how to send emails and things like this, is absolutely crucial to being successful in the outside now. It's not the early 2000s. It's not 1980. We absolutely all depend and rely and use technology in every single thing that we do on the outside, and it's crucial to be able to provide these skills to individuals on the inside. So that was rapid fire. If anybody wants to dip, I know that we're really up on time, but thanks for the question and the opportunity to respond.
I think one thing that I'll just add is that the Colorado DOC, when we were hiring folks, wanted us to purchase a computer for them through their system. And I think they were like $900, whatever it was. It was like the clear ones, the Chromebooks, whatever they wanted us to buy. And so we just budgeted that like in a grant that we were supposed to purchase all of those computers. And then they changed and decided to just give them to our students. We don't have access to email with them, but how we communicate with them is that they use Google Classroom. And we have to have like a Google Classroom that's like within the DOC and be approved through the DOC. So we have some staff members that have that, and they communicate with professors on a Google Doc. And so it's like visible from anybody at the DOC, and they're able to do that and talk with each other. But we didn't wind up having to buy them, but we were willing to. So some may offer that in the future. So thinking about like make sure that's a question when you're hiring folks so you can budget for it. But thank you. This was a good breakout room. I appreciate it. And Haley and Natalie, I love learning from you both.
We're all awesome. Thank you.